Webcast. And you are now live.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council special meeting for Thursday, April the 1st, 2021. Happy new fiscal year, everyone. Anyway,
Yes.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. The time is now 6:08. And we'll do a quick test of everybody's microphone and video to make sure we have everybody present in a count of 4. So Councilor District 3, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am present and accounted for, and although that picture in my background shows a beautiful, lovely sunny day in the woods, I'm sitting here thinking that we might float away tonight. There are buckets full of rain coming down right now. So, but I'm safe and dry inside, ready to work with all of you to do some great business.
Thank you. Councilor District 4.
Good evening. Happy to be here, ready, looking forward to tonight.
Okay. The Tardy District 5.
Are you stuck on the bridge, Mr. Chair?
Oh, I've heard that excuse before, but
I have as well, Mr. Chair. I'm ready to go.
and District 6.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Good evening, colleagues. Good evening to the millions watching at home.
All right, we confirm we have full attendance, therefore quorum's been achieved. Perhaps we could now have an opportunity to introduce some of the staff that are present here. Our solicitor, please.
Good evening, Josh Judah here.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Who we have for the planning department here tonight? I'll step up at once now.
Carl.
Go ahead,
Danny.
Carl.
Evening, councilors. Carl Purvis, Planning Applications Program Manager.
Okay. I think we have Jamie Ellen. Where is she at?
Yep, I'm here as well, and I think I'm failing my video test. Can you see me?
Yeah, there you
there
are.
I am.
Okay. Okay, great. Richard Harvey, I believe we have you on telephone, right?
Correct. Richard Harvey, Manager of Policy and Planning.
Thank you to be on board. Who else we have here? Who else we have from staff present here tonight? We got Mr. Power, Liam.
Good evening, councilors.
And we have Simon.
Good evening.
And who is Amber? Just want to pick.
Amber is our closed captioner for this evening.
Oh, excellent. And who is AWOL? Who's not? That's A.Wall.
Alicia
That would be
Wall,
Alicia
legislative support.
Thank you. So we haven't gone AWOL. Okay, all right. Just joking. Okay, and we also have Mr. Edwards is on the line, ready to go when we get to the public hearing portion. Okay, our next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes of March the 4th. May I have a motion to approve those, please?
So move, Mr. Chair.
Moved by Councilor Kent, seconded by
Second.
Councilor Purdy. All those in favor of the minutes of March 11th, say aye.
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 Motion carried. The approval of order of business or any additions or deletions. First of all, do we have any additions or deletions, Mr. Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do have a requested addition to the order of business. That's item 16.1, new access point to the Silver Sands Beach. There is a staff report related to that item that has been circulated to councilors.
Okay. Okay, and that's been added to the agenda. And Councilor Kent, you wanted to do an adjustment for acknowledging certain correspondence before the public hearing?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that we move in the agenda item on correspondence, which I believe, sorry, I got a lot of pages to put through here. Correspondence, which normally is done at 11.1 after a variance hearing, I'd like to move it before we proceed with the public hearing so that it's dealt with and acknowledged.
Okay, I have a seconder for
And
that.
that- sorry, do I have to identify well, no, we're just moving the correspondence.
Yeah.
That- Yeah, okay.
We can move it to occur after item point 9, notices of tabled matters.
Yeah, that's where we're putting it, yeah.
Okay.
All right, so we have a seconder for those amendments that changes the order of business.
I'll second.
Second by Councilor Purdy. Any questions, on those adjustments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the amended order of business? Say aye. Aye. Motion carried. Any business arising from the minutes? Are there any call for declarations of conflict of interest tonight? Motions of reconsideration, none. Motion of rescission, none. No deferred business. So no notice of table matters. So we'll go to the agenda for correspondence 11.1. Councilor Kent, you want to raise a particular matter of one of the correspondence received?
Yes, we've received a submission from ARMCO around scheduling of public hearings. There's some dissatisfaction with the wait that they've had. They acknowledge that there has been a COVID implication in some of the scheduling, but they're asking for a special meeting. They have acknowledged that in the past we've been having one public hearing per night. They did ask for us to consider 2, so we're ahead of that. We have 2 this evening, and it's so that practice we are already considering helping to move things along. But they're asking for a special meeting so that their public hearing can be dealt with. So I guess a question: do we have the ability to have a sense of whether or not we're going to need that, or will we be okay in the next public? I believe we have a bit of an agenda planned out, do we not, Mr. Chair, on when we think this might come forward?
Well, maybe we should ask our planning staff at what timeline they anticipate that report to be finalized and ready to go for at least first reading to get to the public hearing.
That's been done.
We did that one, okay?
We did that. Yeah, we did that in the last meeting.
Okay, the one I called the conflict on. Okay, all right, okay. So so we just need to call for a special meeting then to get.
Well, I know that we had some discussion over, I can't remember, Simon, I think it would be in your notes that we talked about when that one might come forward. And I'm just wondering if we've already got it sort of scheduled in the next meeting, we may not need a special one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to the committee. If the matter has received first reading, there is a good chance that it has already been scheduled, which would mean that the advertisement schedule has been set for that matter. So if advertisements have gone out, it would potentially slow things down to schedule a special meeting. We would most likely want to maintain the current schedule because the advertising period is usually the longest period of wait. That's the thing that does require 3 weeks. So I will let staff speak more to that if necessary. But for those matters that have already received first reading and have been scheduled, it would make sense to continue with the current schedule at this point because that would provide the fastest timeline to a public hearing at this time, would be my understanding.
Carl, did you want to?
Yes, Mr. Purvis, input, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So where this one, as I understand from the correspondence from ARMCO, we've got that scheduled for the first week of June, I believe is what the letter said when the public hearing is. We need, per the council COVID admin order, we need 3 weeks in advance to about 3.5 weeks notice to get an advertisement in the paper. It needs to be in the paper 3 consecutive weekends before a hearing. So that's the notice that Simon is mentioning. So if you were looking to hold the special meeting to have the hearing, That can be done, and the only qualifier I'd put on that is that we need at least 3.5 weeks in order to get the ads in order so that it can be all legal per the legislation.
So is this our 3 weeks counting from today? So will that put us in line for our meeting, the first meeting of May? Are we still on schedule for that?
Well, I believe the meetings, and Simon can be able to confirm this, but I believe the meetings in between now and that June meeting are basically spoken for. The regular schedule ones, we're booked up with hearings. And again, Simon can that's why it was delayed to June, because we were basically having 2 hearings each meeting between now and that June meeting. So I believe what Armco's asking is, could you schedule in an additional meeting somewhere in between those regularly scheduled meetings so that they could have their hearing completed?
All right, well, why don't we poll the members of council offline later after tonight's meeting to find if we have any availability between the May and June scheduled meetings to see if we can fit that in to facilitate that request, okay?
Okay, agreed.
Okay. Thank you, councilors, and thank you, Carl. Any other correspondence we acknowledge there, Mr. Clerk, that we received? I know you circulated some to us, but just want to make sure you acknowledge what we received.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to Community Council. There was one other item of correspondence, and that relates to the public hearing for item 10.1.2, case 22748. Correspondence has been circulated to all members of the Community Council.
Thank you. All right. Let's get into, so we have no petitions and no presentations. Are there any petitions we filed tonight? Hearing none and no petition, no presentations. Okay, so we'll go into now the public hearings. We'll call item number 10.1.1, case number 22847, development agreement for PID 00374652 and 4146660, Main Road and Silver Lanes, Eastern Passage. Perhaps I can call upon, first of all, do we want to have Councilor Kent put the motion on the floor and then we can start the presentation?
Certainly. Mr. Chair, just want to confirm that you're all aware that there's a slight change to what was in the package that came out late this afternoon. So I'm going to read it according to what the change has been made. And if you need some clarification on that, I'm sure staff will be addressing that in the presentation. So I move that Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council approve the proposed development agreement, which shall be substantially of the same form as.
Sorry, if I can just jump in, I believe we should read those following the public hearing for process fees.
Okay, I thought we would put the motion on the floor, then have the presentation. Okay, well, let's go forward now with the presentation, and then we can put the motion on the floor, then go from there.
Okay,
So-
thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry,
so-
go ahead.
Go ahead, Jamie Allen.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jamie Ellen Klenovic, and I'm a planner with the Urban Enabled Applications team at HRM. Can I have the next slide? I'm here to discuss an application from Lookout Investments to enter into a development agreement to allow 2 new apartment buildings, one on each of 2 lots on Main Road and Eastern Passage. This applicant originally made an application for substantive amendments to an existing development agreement that already permits 2 apartment buildings on these same lots. They would like to make some modest changes to the development, including reducing the maximum height of the buildings to 4 stories, removing the required phasing, and changing some of the landscaping and amenity space. However, after some review, staff proposed and the applicant agreed to approach this application by discharging the existing development agreement against the subject site and entering into a new development agreement. The planning process required for a new DA and for the substantive amendment is the same. They both require a public hearing. Staff made this request to simplify the administration of the development agreement and the permitting process. The existing development agreement had already undergone a substantive amendment in 2019 and included a parcel described as Block C that is no longer under common ownership of the subject site. In addition, the current owner of Block C also approached the planning department with an application for a substantive amendment, which is also scheduled for a public hearing before council this evening, as case 22748. So you can see that things are starting to get complicated with the original DA, another amendment, and then a separate amendment on this block C. So the proposed development agreement is a consolidation of the original DA and the 2019 amendment with a revised DA area that includes only the subject site, along with the new amendments requested by the applicant. While this approach arguably makes this application more confusing, the goal is to provide the applicant and the development officer with a clean development agreement that applies only to the subject site, which should facilitate permitting. Can I have the next slide? This is a location of the subject site. It is comprised of 2 lots that were subdivided in June of 2019. The site is located on Main Road, slightly west of the intersection of Main Road and Silvers Lane. Next slide. There's not currently much to see on the subject site, but this is the view from Main Road down what will be the common shared driveway. Next slide. The site is currently zoned C2 and designated community commercial. Neither of these things are proposed to change. The enabling policy is COM 12, which allows apartment buildings with more than 12 units in the C2 zone only by development agreement. The site is currently vacant. The 2 apartment buildings approved by the 2017 DA have not been constructed. Next slide. This is the proposed site plan. Main Road is to the left on this slide. The placement and footprint of the buildings is identical to what was approved in the 2017 DA. The 2 buildings will be accessed from Main Road across a private driveway, which is secured by an easement in favor of the rear lot. Next slide. Both buildings would have the same design, and this is the front elevation. Next slide. Here are the side elevations. The design has changed very little from the original approval. Next slide. And here's the back elevation. The buildings are 4 stories with some vehicle parking underground. Next slide. MPS policy COM 12 is the enabling policy and provides the criteria for council to consider when making its decision on the development agreement. Each lot must have an area of at least 1,858 square meters. Frontage on a public street is required. Maximum permitted height is 4 stories plus a penthouse. The minimum required setback from interior lot lines is a distance equal to half the height of the building. The building design must be complementary to the surrounding area. A mixture of unit types and sizes is required. The maximum permitted density is 36 units per acre, and landscaping, open space, and amenity areas are all required. Next slide. MPS policy IM 11 provides some additional criteria the council must also consider, including the adequacy of sewer and water services, road networks, and schools and other community facilities. That controls are in place to reduce conflict with the type of use, height, bulk, lot coverage, traffic, access and egress, parking, open storage, and signs. And that the proposed site is suitable in terms of slope, soil conditions, and the location of water courses. Next slide. We did not hold a public information meeting, but we mailed fact sheets about the application to 33 neighbors within the notification area shown in the staff report. We did not receive any feedback before the staff report was published. The case website was first published in April of 2020, and since that time has had 133 unique page views. Next slide. The proposed development agreement permits 2 4-story apartment buildings with up to 60 dwelling units in each building. Of these, 32 units in each building must have at least 2 bedrooms. At least 185 vehicle parking spaces are required. This includes both underground and surface parking. A total of 22 bicycle parking spaces are also required, 11 on each lot. No phasing is required. Landscaping is required in accordance with the preliminary plan attached to the DA. A detailed landscaping plan will be required prior to permitting. And the DA requires at least 140 square meters of amenity space within each building. Next slide. Proposed non-substantive amendments include extensions to the dates of commencement and completion, changes to the exterior design of the buildings to the required unit mix or to the site layout, and a reduction in the number of parking spaces by up to 20%. Next slide. So this application is coming forward with a positive recommendation. We're asking council to discharge the existing development agreement against this subject site only. The DA would remain in place against Block C, and to approve the proposed development agreement that would allow 2 new apartment buildings, 1 on each of these 2 lots in Eastern Passage. So this is where we propose a change. So I was just going over the DA today and I noticed a small typo in the recitals. So the recitals are where we kind of go through the history of the development agreement. In this case, we talk about the existing development agreement and the amendments and when the property was sold and when it was subdivided. And in the second paragraph of the recitals, we notice that let me see if I can explain this. One of the parties from the original development agreement was described as the developer, quote unquote, developer on this development agreement. But in this case, the developer is Lookout Investments. So you can see a small change in the second item on this slide and in the third item. So the request is to approve the proposed development agreement, which shall be substantially of the same form as set out in attachment A of the report dated January 13th, 2021. With the exception that the second recital deletes the words the developer and replaces them with Harbour Investments Limited. And the same mistake happened in the discharging agreement. So it's essentially the same thing. Again, replacing the words the developer with Harbour Investments Limited in the second recital paragraph. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you very much. Thank you very much. Any questions from members of council? Councilor Kent first.
Yeah, I only have one, and it's in relation to if you could expand maybe or give me more details on the traffic impact for this particular one.
So the number of units would be identical to what was already approved. There's 60 units per building permitted in the original DA, and they're still proposing 60 units in each building now. So there isn't any change.
Okay, thank you. That's all for me, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions from any other councilors? I just had one quick question. We talked about the landscaping plan. Does that include a stormwater management plan for the property and make sure there's no issues of flooding or redirection of water on the neighbors?
That will be required prior to permitting. So it isn't included in the DA, but that work will be required prior to permitting.
Thank you. Are there any further questions, members of council? Councilor Purdy.
Yeah, is this on municipal sewer? Is it in the service?
Yeah, yes, it is. So it'll be serviced across the easement that goes along the shared driveway to the back lot, and then the front lot will be serviced directly from Main Road.
Okay. Any other further questions from members of council? Hear no more then? Open the floor now for public input. Open the floor for public hearing. Who do we have to wish to come forward to speak on this matter? Please identify yourself for the record.
Point of order, doesn't the applicant have?
Oh, yes, that's right, the applicant. Is the applicant present here tonight? Is that Mr. Edwards?
No, that's
the next case, yeah. Do we have an applicant present for tonight's hearing? Do we have a representative for the applicant?
I believe there is an applicant there and should be circulated via the annotated agenda there. But we do have an applicant present, and we will just open up in just a moment.
Would that be JP Chater? Was that?
yes.
Okay, I see JP Chater now. May want to unmute yourself, sir. There we are. You're still muted, Mr. Chater. There we are. There you go. We can hear you now.
Great. How are you?
Go ahead, sir. You have 10 minutes to present your case to Community Council.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I don't have anything really substantial to add. Most of it was basically touched on. We have taken this building from the 4 stories plus penthouse to just 4 stories. We've moved the amenity space onto the first floor. We have eliminated the phasing, which allows us to build both buildings staggered, but at the same time, more or less. That'll reduce the time spent on or the pollution, noise pollution, dirt work, and excavation by allowing us to do a lot of this at the same time. But otherwise, it's very much the same development as previously presented.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of members of council for Mr. Chater? Hearing none. Okay, now I'll open the floor now for the public hearing. Is there anyone present here tonight who wishes to speak to this matter? Please identify yourself if there is.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can confirm that we have no registered speakers for this public hearing tonight.
No registered speakers. Okay, I'll take a motion to close public hearing then. A motion to close public hearing.
So moved.
Moved by Councilor Kent, seconded by
Second.
Councilor Purdy. Motion to close public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Councilor Kent, the floor is now yours to put the motion forward, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council approve the proposed development agreement, which shall be substantially of the same form as set out in attachment A, with the exception that the second recital deletes the words "the developer" and replaces them with Garmar Investment Limited. And 2, approve by resolution the discharging agreement, which shall be substantially of the same form as set out in attachment B, with the exception that the second recital deletes the words "the developer" and replaces them with Garmar Investments Limited. And 3, require that both the development agreement and discharging agreement be signed by the property owner within 240 days, or any extension thereof granted by council on request of the property owner from the date of final approval by council and any other bodies as necessary, including applicable appeal periods, whichever is later. Otherwise, this approval will be void. And sorry, I'm missing a piece.
Shall be void and obligations arising hereafter shall be put to an end.
And obligations arising hereunder shall be put to an end. Thank you.
Okay.
So moved.
Seconder, please. Seconder, please.
I'll second that, Councilor Austin.
Okay, Councilor Austin seconds that. Okay, is there any debate? Councilor Kent, do you want to open debate?
Yes, I'd just like to put forward the position that I have on this. I'm supportive of it. It has been ongoing for quite a while with the exchange of ownership and such. I respect the decisions of the past council around the approval of the first development agreement, and the changes that have come forward, I think, are certainly advantageous to the community at large. Reducing the height, and for any of you who have experienced developments in the past, height is often a point of contention for communities. So I think this is definitely a positive result. It's also in keeping with the local community of the area. Discharging and entering into a new development agreement is, again, I spoke to that with honoring and respecting what's been done in the past. I'm also any area that I do have a little bit of concerns at. I think that they've been dealt with as far as traffic, and that your question around stormwater management is a key one. The area that this development is going into is an area of Eastern Pastures that has not been developed. It's not in a parcel that is fully surrounded by other neighbors and neighboring properties where residences are. So I'm particularly pleased with the notion of phasing it to get, or building them together, at least in staggering. I think that has, you put up with that within the community all at once versus a little bit a longer period of time. I also want to acknowledge the challenges that building expenses to materials and contractors that development would need in order to do these projects are inflated now with the impact of COVID on the economy. So I think that this is a move that as a council we should be respectful of and to support our economy in that way through good decision making that allows for this kind of shift. The other piece is I had it there and it's gone now. Sorry. So overall, I think it's good. Oh, I know what it was. You know, housing crisis is very real and very relevant to all communities, and the Eastern Passage area is no different. I have emails regularly around access to housing. This one is, I believe, is a good fit, and I'll be supporting it and ask the council support it.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other comments from any other members? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 No one's opposed. Motion carried unanimously. Thank you very much and good luck, sir. Our next item on the agenda is 10.1.2, case number 22748, amending development agreement for 30 and 38 Silver Lanes, Eastern Passage. Will the staff come forward and make a presentation, please?
Good evening, councilors. Carl Purvis, Planning Applications Program Manager. Just looking to confirm you can see my presentation up here on your screens?
Not yet, just see me.
Sorry, Carl. Yeah, I think the screen sharing is showing the Zoom meeting right now.
All right, we're going to try that once more.
There you go.
There we are.
Yeah.
I was afraid we're going to see Carl's wedding video, but he kept clicking the wrong stuff. Good.
Still good
You're
on
not,
full screen?
Not full screen at the moment, though.
Once more, this time with feeling.
Unfortunately, there still appears to be a problem with full screening. So what we can do is our legislative assistant, Liam Power, can set up the presentation and you can direct us to advances as needed.
Fair enough.
Okay, Mr. Power, it's in your hands. You got the power. Thank you. There we go.
Great. So again, good evening, councilors. Carl Purvis, Planning Applications Program Manager. Here on behalf of the planner on this file, Daryl Jodry, who can't be here tonight, to speak to case 22748 for the amending development agreement for 30 to 38 Silvers Lane, Eastern Passage. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, this is an application made by Gary Edwards for 30 to 38 Silvers Lane. And the proposal is a change to an existing development agreement, actually a small section of the land that was the subject to the previous application that Jamie Ellen just had at our previous hearing. And the proposal in this application is to amend the agreement to allow the subdivision of the land shown in gray on this map here in front of you, to allow an existing commercial building to continue with its workshop use, including the sale of vehicles on that site, to allow residential uses on the site, and to allow a limited number of commercial uses for the C2 zone on the property. Next slide, please. So this is the general location of the site here, and Jamie Ellen went through this. So Silvers Lane, I'll skip this. Next slide, please. To this more specific contextual picture of the site. So on this slide, you can see Cow Bay Road on the bottom of the screen going from left to right. You can see Main Road up the left-hand side of the screen going from top to bottom to top. And Silvers Lane would be the other prominent road that's going left to right on the screen and in the middle of the screen, with the subject lands just being to the right of the middle. Next slide, please. So in terms of a policy framework on this property, the land is zoned C2 and designated in the municipal planning strategy community commercial within the policy documents for Eastern Passage, Cow Bay. The existing use on this small piece of land, again, the lighter gray shown in that map, which is known as Block C. Existing uses are a single family dwelling as well as that workshop. There's also on the rest of the site, as mentioned by Jamie Ellen, there were 2 apartment buildings permitted by the existing DA, which council is now discharged. Next slide, please. So to provide a little bit of history on this application, back in October 2016, this is when Community Council originally approved the development agreement to allow those 2 multiple unit dwellings on the larger site as a whole. And then in December of 2018, Community Council approved the first amending agreement to clarify the subdivision allowances for this small portion of the land that we're talking about, 30 to 38 Silvers Lane, as well as some development conditions for the development and to provide some additional time for construction, so a time extension. And then here tonight, Community Council was considering both the previous application, which you just approved, as well as this one here for 30 to 38 Silvers Lane. Next slide, please. So in terms of the existing context, our subject site is in green on this slide. So with the existing context, the abutting property in orange, that's intended to contain the 2 60-unit apartment buildings, as council just heard in the previous presentation. The existing development agreement only allowed low-density residential uses to be subdivided and developed in the property in green. And so the amendment further requires that these particular dwellings that would be located in the area in green, they must directly access Silvers Lane. So the vehicle traffic needs to go down to Silvers Lane and then enter Main Road down on there. The proposed amendments, they would have no bearing, and they would continue to have no bearing on any development that's happening in the lands in the orange on this site in the aforementioned application, especially now that they are 2 separate development agreements. Next slide, please. So in terms of the existing issue, the lot in green, 30 to 38 Silvers Lane, it previously benefited from an access easement over the abutting properties that were intended to contain the apartment building. So in essence, for some of the uses, it would be possible to take the vehicles and take them down the driveway, which leads to Main Road within the orange parcel, taking them a little bit further away from that intersection of Cow Bay, Shore Road, and Main Road. The access easement, however, was removed when the orange lands, the abutting properties, were sold to a different owner. Now, through the course of review in this application, HRM Development Engineering, they've identified a few concerns for traffic volumes entering Cow Bay Road and Main Road, the proximity of Silvers Lane to that intersection, given that it's curved, it's a little bit, they find that the stopping distances are a little bit difficult, and it's a little bit difficult to enter and egress via that. Next slide, please. So in order to resolve this, the proposed solution was that the amending agreement contained within your reports, it limits the permitted uses at 30 to 38 Silvers Lane to a smaller number of C2 commercial uses, those that our development engineers are satisfied that would be safe to access exclusively off of Silvers Lane, and these are uses that the applicant has agreed that they're satisfied with in terms of allowed on that site. So the proposed permitted uses on the green site, the 30 to 38 Silvers Lane, include 2 2-unit dwellings, as well as the existing workshop use in addition to the car sales that's there, as well as 11 other C2 uses that are listed in your report. Next slide, please. So this, within the Eastern Passage Cow Bay Municipal Planning Strategy, the enabling policies on this are COM12, COM2, and IM11. And these require council to consider to lot size, access to public street, and also a focus on reducing the amount of conflict between whatever uses are proposed within the development agreement as opposed to those surrounding the site. So important to note that these policies were the ones that were used when the development agreement was originally approved, as well as when it was amended the first time, and these continue to be in place, and staff have not identified any policy issues or conflicts in terms of this amending agreement. Next slide, please. Regarding public engagement, feedback received was limited. We mailed out 54 notifications, 2 phone calls received, and 2 emails. Mostly high-level inquiries, a question about water servicing in the area, not specifically related to this site, as well as some clarification as to what changes were proposed in this application as opposed to the one that council just discussed previously. It was a little bit confusing, which is completely understandable, given that they're right next to each other and similar addresses. Next slide, please. So ultimately, given the lack of the absence of issues in policy, and after the staff review, staff recommend that Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council approve the proposed development agreement as set in attachment A of the staff report. That concludes my presentation. And thank you, councilors.
Thank you, sir. Any questions of members of council for Mr. Purvis? Any questions? Seeing none, then we'll have the applicant come forward to make.
Mr.
Go,
Chair,
Mr.
just a comment for Carl. How often does he hear a lack of issues within policy? I mean, that must be a planner's greatest terms to be able to say.
Always nice when we can, always nice. I'll leave it at that.
Councilor Kent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On Councilor Mancini's comment, this has been a long journey. It was a confusing scenario from start to finish. And I want to commend staff as well as the applicant on their stick-to-itiveness to, if there's such a word. I've heard my mother use that. On going forward and creating the opportunities for some more housing. So I'll leave it there. But thank you, Carl, and anyone on your team to get to where the public hearing could go forward.
And no further questions of staff. For the staff, we'll have the applicant now come forward and make his plea to community council. Mr. Edwards, I believe you're on now. Please hit *6 to unmute your phone.
Hello.
Hello, sir.
Good evening. This is Chairman Hensby.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, sir, councilors and staff. My name is Gary Edwards, and I am the applicant for this development agreement amendment. And I simply want to finish what I started some 8 years ago with this development. I did submit a letter earlier for council and staff to read, and it just gives basically a brief history of where we've been and how we've got to this point. I just want to say that, the plan from the beginning was to subdivide these remaining lots. In doing so, this will allow for more housing in our community, which is very high demand right now. And I do have positive feedback in the subdivision process from Halifax Water, Engineering and Planning. And we have also already upgraded the existing water and sewer services on Silver's Lane to accommodate what we've asked for in this case. And we've also supplied an addendum to the traffic study, the existing traffic study, which also states that the uses, the 11 uses plus the existing uses will not cause any further traffic concerns. So basically that's all I got to say. In closing, I would ask that council support this matter. I would appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Are there any questions of council to Mr. Edwards? I see none. Okay. Now we'll open the floor to the public hearing. Is anyone present tonight who wants to speak to this matter? Please identify yourself for the record. Mr. Clerk, do we have anyone registered to speak to the night?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Community Council, we have no registered speakers for this matter.
Hearing none, they'll call for a motion to close the public hearing. Councilor Kent, like to move the closure of the hearing? Microphone's muted, ma'am. Thank you.
So moved.
Moved by Councilor Kent, seconded by Councilor Mancini. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carried. I'll entertain a motion now, Councilor Kent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move that Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council approve the proposed amending development agreement, which shall be substantially of the same form as set out in attachment A, and require the amending development agreement to be signed by the property owner within 240 days or any extension thereof granted by council on request of the property owner from the date of the final approval by council and any other bodies as necessary, including applicable appeal periods whichever is later. Otherwise, this approval will be void and obligations arising hereunder shall be at an end. So moved.
Seconded, please, by Councilor Mancini, seconds it. Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Councilor Kent?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to acknowledge again the journey that this Mr. Edwards has taken on this final parcel in that area. I have been able to get an update not only from Mr. Edwards but from staff on some of the contentious areas that sort of got in the way of his original intent, which was to develop that first parcel. And I want to thank him for his perseverance and his patience. And I know it had to have been a frustrating experience. Mr. Edwards has been a longstanding developer within the Eastern Passage area and in his hometown. Not I wouldn't say as a large scale developer, but a quality developer. So the means that he goes about everything is respectful and certainly well accepted within the community. So I do believe that this is the right move for the Eastern Passage area. I want to acknowledge as well that he did move moved a small house that was in the location where the development, the apartment buildings will be going from the last public hearing. And that in fact, at one period was my MLA office for a number of years. I had to flood it out at the Quigley's Corner area before he had built an apartment building down there that is almost like an icon within the community corner of Quigley's Corner. And he was very quick to offer me space in what was a little house that he had been renting for tenants. So I appreciate that he did not feel the need to tear that down, and it was moved and will be now a new opportunity for someone for a small home. So I think this is positive for the community, and I would ask for council support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other comments from councilors? Hearing none, I'll call for the question on the motion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? None. Motion carried. Thank you very much, and good luck, Mr. Edwards. Okay, next item, we have no variance hearings tonight. So next item on the agenda is no information items brought forward, none. Staff discussions, reports, I believe we have no members of community councils, nothing to bring forward. We have no motions to bring forward. Can we have a motion?
I think you missed petitions, Mr. Chair.
I thought I asked for that earlier tonight during after correspondence and stuff when we did earlier.
Oh, maybe you did.
Okay, but no one has a petition to file, right? Okay.
No.
Take a motion to approve the in-camera minutes of March the 4th. A motion to accept those minutes as March the 4th in-camera minutes. Moved by Councilor Mancini, seconded by Councilor Kent. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Next item of business, the added item, we have added report there, the Silver Sands Beach access point. Councilor Kent, want to take that away?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your indulgence to the council for indulgence on adding it in as well. I want to acknowledge the hard work that staff put in to get it here today. It's been something that has been ongoing for a long time. I have talked about Silver Sands Beach in previous applications that were before us. I know former Councilor Karsten did as well. He in fact brought the original motion to the floor here in the chamber, which was supported around having staff investigate options for an alternative access to a well-known, well-loved, and historically and culturally significant beach in an HRM beach that is in the community of Cow Bay. this motion today is a culmination of that work. I want to reiterate the importance of Silver Sands Beach. Right now, there is the Silver Sands Beach Park has a rendition of Bronwyn, a statue of a moose that is a rendition of a number of statues that have been on the Cow Bay moose. That is only one example of some of the history. That there is Indigenous history and culture related to the beach. That beach has been really the catalyst to the development of the Hydrostone and some of the foundations for the McKay Bridge. The bridge, I think maybe both bridges. And I think if my memory is correct, there's some sand that was removed as well for Shearwater. So despite all of that, the beach continued to be a very important piece of access to our coastal area of Cow Bay. There is a lot of history related to local activity and visitor activity, all of which I think is worth bringing forth and bearing fruit around interpretive opportunities to share that history. Right now, the access is on private property that has the connection at the end of that right of way or easement is actually been deteriorated by erosion, and the erosion is the easement is actually leading to a very small, like a 3-foot square little piece of land, of which if someone did go to that spot, they then, in order to access the beach, they'd have to cross private property. So the notion of having an alternative access is vitally important. Staff are aware of that. Vitally important to the community, is vitally important to the municipality to make sure that this area is not in a landlocked situation. Some investigating on potential options for parkland acquisition has been done preliminarily, but this kind of decision is a decision of council to allow staff to go ahead and further investigate and further potentially negotiate some land purchase through the Parkland Acquisition Fund, of which I have confirmed that that's not new money, that money is there, and staff are recommending that we bring it to Regional Council for consideration. So with that, I should have put the motion on the floor probably first. So with that, I will move that Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council approve the proposed,
Recommend.
Harbour, thank you. Recommend that Harbour East Marine Drive recommend the Regional Council direct the Chief Administrative Officer to CAO to explore the acquisition of lands for an improved and alternative access to Silver Sands Beach pursuant to the Real Property Transactions Policy Administrative Order 2018-004-ADM. So moved.
Second. So we have a seconder, Councilor Mancini. Any comment or questions from any members of council? I don't see any questions. Councilor Mancini.
Mr. Chair, if I may, so to be clear, I don't know if the councilor or staff can help me understand. So the attachment A map, and it shows where the councilor was talking about the private property that has an easement. So what I'm not clear on is there been an identified location? See Mr. Harvey on board, a possible location that we are considering, is that has to be investigated? I wasn't clear when I read the report. Also, if you could, Richard, clarify that for me.
Sure, Mr. Chair. Yes, that's exactly the point. What you'd be doing is with your recommendation to Regional Council, you would be having us explore new opportunities for an alternative location.
So there's not an identified spot at this point in time?
That's correct.
Okay.
If I may, I believe at our previous community councils a little while back, we had a development of a subdivision of property to the north of the ponds, and we talked about possible access for those lands. So that's probably a part of the discussions, I guess, in the future. So.
Okay, so we don't know exactly where the Richard, your and team would go out and investigate this and come back with some options, maybe one, maybe more than one, and then at that time, I suspect that's an in-camera conversation about price tag and all that kind of stuff. Is that correct?
Once we get into the further details, Mr. Chair, through you to Councilor, yes, we'll be looking at all of these matters.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments? The only thing I'd like to add is that I remember as a child going down there and climbing over the concrete alligators and the hippopotamus, the elephant. There was a lot of concrete animals on that beach back in the day, and Mother Nature's kind of claimed them and made them back into sand. But anyway.
And that wasn't yesterday that he was a child either, Councilor Purdy. I think they were real dinosaurs when he was a child.
Yeah, that's about 1970, 71. I remember being down there just 50 years ago. Come on now. All right. Any further comments on Councilor Kent?
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to round this out with acknowledging the tremendous amount of passion and concern that's been raised around the potential loss of access to the beach. It has been a contentious situation around the easement that I believe strongly that finding a new access will bring some excitement and I hope some renewed energy around the use of the beach and clarify some issues around dog walking and access, straight access, and just the original easement was done at a time when there was no properties in and around, no residents in and around that space. There were no housing lots abutting the actual beach area as well. And since then, things have changed significantly in the area, and this is a very good decision to move forward on. I certainly believe, and to just to look for the future and look for the celebration of that beach again.
Thank you, Councillor. Call for the question on the motion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carried. Any notice of motions, members of council? Hearing none. The date of our next meeting is May the 6th. We'll also be checking our calendars to see if there's an alternative date for another anticipated extra hearing before the June date. So at that moment, I'll take a motion to adjourn then. Councilor Purdy?
I so move.
Councilor Purdy is the official closer in all these meetings.
She's the closer, absolutely.
So that's a wrap, everyone. Thank you very much for everyone's participation. Thank you, staff, and all for present tonight, and thank you for those who are watching tonight. And make sure you watch us on your favorite show again.
Enjoy your Easter weekend.
Happy Easter.
Council